Right, hi everyone. Thank you very much for attending this webinar today on sports scholarships in 2021. There's a lot to talk about. I'm sure that most of you joining us are interested in sports scholarships or are interested in using sports to get into American universities. And hopefully today we're going to try and clear up some of the confusion about what's going on and let you know what you should be thinking about right now if this is something that you're interested in. So I'm really pleased to have with me Rob Thomas. Rob Thomas is from Sporting Elite USA, and he helps students, particularly in the UK, get into universities in America for sports scholarships. So Rob, thanks for joining us.
No problem at all, no problem.
So Rob, you went to America on a sports scholarship yourself, didn't you?
Yep, I did. I went on a soccer scholarship, or football, as we would say here in the UK. A very quick overview is no one ever told me about football opportunities in the US when I was younger. I played at the Wimbledon Academy, played for the school, all sorts. And when I finished sixth form, I decided I'm going to go traveling instead of go straight to university. My first stop was LA. And when I was out there, friends that I met told me about the opportunities of playing football at college in the US. So I went to a small PCC, Pasadena City College. No one probably knows of that here in the UK, but again, it was an opportunity to play soccer. If someone would have told me about it a year ago or 2 years prior, I could have very likely gone to a much bigger university, but I didn't know about it. And when I found out about it, it was about a month before classes are due to go, so there was hardly any funding left. I ended up starting there. When I came back to the UK, I realized sort of how many other people probably don't know about the opportunities or don't think they're good enough to go out there. So hence why I got involved in sports scholarships to the US, just to make people aware. Look at all these great opportunities. Whatever your sport, there are some very unique sports that you can get funding in, not just the prime time sports in the UK of football or rugby, whatever it may be. There's other sports as well that we'll go through in a little bit more detail later.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the way it's going to work today is we're going to do a very short presentation, just use that to guide us to talk about a few different things with sports scholarships. If you've got any questions that you think of now or during the presentation or afterwards, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring that and I can fire those questions at Rob. So any questions you've got, don't worry about how silly you think they are. We've heard them all before and Rob will answer them. So on that note, I am going to share my screen and hopefully you can all see that. So as I said, my name is Jason. I'm the Director of UES Education. Rob is the Director of Sporting Elite USA. And Rob is the man to speak to about sports scholarships in America. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID, of course, and how that's affected things to do with sports in America. We're going to look at what the funding situation is like for sports this year. We're going to talk a little bit about which sports have gone, because they have disappeared from some colleges in some cases, and whether or not they'll come back. We're going to talk about the thing that everyone always asks about, which is SAT and ACT scores. Do you have to do them? What scores do you have to get? How important are they? Going to talk a little bit about what should sports students should be thinking about right now, depending on what year you're in, and of course answer any of the questions that you've got. So again, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and we'll make the recording available on our YouTube channel afterwards. Okay, so Rob, I'm going to hand over to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's happened with COVID?
Yeah, so a lot has changed over the last 12 months, obviously not just in the sporting world, but in the world in general. So students that are looking to go to the US and via the sporting route, probably seen lots of negative news about sports being dropped or universities having funding reduced. A lot of this is accurate. There have been some casualties. However, coaches are still recruiting. I can't stress this enough. They are still looking for athletes. They still want students. The whole way recruiting is going and timelines are changing. So it doesn't follow necessarily the same path that we've used in previous years. That does vary from uni to uni. Some unis have better funding than others, different sports as well. So in terms of the universities, you've probably seen some big ones like Stanford and Brown have had some sports drop off. This supposedly wasn't due to COVID. It's something that had been in the pipeline for quite a while. When you actually look at the grand scheme of them two universities as an example, they were two of the universities that offered the most sports anyway across the US, and they've just brought it down in line with most other universities so they can invest more money into them same sports. Again, they said they'd been planning on it for a while. I think COVID just gave it the little nudge over the line that was needed to make it happen. There have been sports that have been hit harder than others. Some of the smaller sports, for example, fencing has been hit quite hard. Gymnastics has been hit a little bit. And all sports, whether it be swimming, soccer, they've had to take some form of a hit, whether it be reduced funding. University of Cincinnati, for example, have discontinued their men's soccer program, and that's that was a really top tier men's soccer college. So there are casualties, but again, as I mentioned on the first point, there are still a lot of opportunities that are with coaches still recruiting. The great thing of the US is there's a lot of universities, a lot of variables between uni to uni. So again, if you're of the level, there will still be opportunities for you. What I would also say is the competitiveness now in terms of these opportunities. That's where doing well academically and things like that can really help set you apart as well. So if you do have a high GPA, you've done well at GCSEs, or you're going to do well at, or predicted to do well at BTEC or A level, or in your SAT or ACT, which we can go over in a bit more detail in a bit, that is another way that you can set yourself apart. And again, just make yourself a more attractive option to a coach, because they won't have to ask for as many favors with the admissions team. So you will also see with the NCAA, who are the governing body of college sports, they've given students that are in their senior year right now an extra year of eligibility. So that does mean it is a bit more competitive for students that are wanting to start this September. So a lot of students have decided to go on a gap year, or have a uni in the UK for a year and then transfer. A lot of different ways you can go about it. So if you are in your last year of school right now and you're thinking the funding isn't there for me to go, don't think, right, you have to go straight to the US. You can go via the UK or take a gap year in most sports, again, depending on what sport you do. There are other ways around it. The sporting fixtures, as you all know, most of them have been cancelled this year in the UK. The challenges we face in this country is that some countries around the world are still having competitions. So that's something that we just can't get around right now. Hopefully sooner rather than later, we can start getting out there, playing matches on the football field or competing on the track, whatever it may be, getting on the water for rowers. And as soon as you can, you need to start getting video footage as a matter of, it's imperative for team sports to be able to show coaches what you can bring to the team. Even if you don't have it right now, just get to the park, just get some skills footage, or do something where you can send to coaches just to get in front of them to show you what you can do. Doesn't mean they're going to make an offer to you right away, but again, it just gets you in front of them so that they know that you're an option before they potentially verbally give money to someone else, even though you might have the potential to be a better athlete than them. I mentioned that the spots for places due to seniors being given an extra year and funding being cut at a number of universities, it is a lot more competitive, and that's where the academics, the SATs, ACTs, etc., can really help set you apart. So it's a matter of using everything possible to help set you apart, not just from the sporting standpoint. And again, timelines have been altered. Some coaches are going to go a lot further than what they have done in certain sports and what they are used to doing. Again, it depends on the sport. Track and field athletes, I know some coaches that are holding off as long as they can to make that final decision to try and hope that they get some events this calendar year, this summer, so they can then see where they are and make an offer. I've got other athletes for 2022 that have already verbally committed and done and dusted for 2022. So different coaches, different sports are following different timelines. But my advice to anyone, if you are considering the US, however you're going about trying to get there, get started as soon as possible, get in front of them coaches, make them aware of you. Again, you won't finish your recruiting early in all likelihood, but you need to make them aware of you before it's too late. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of COVID. The NCAA, I can go through. Do you want me to go through the SAT and ACT criteria now, David, in terms of the NCAA requirements, or do you want to leave that for a bit?
Let's come on to that in a moment. I was going to ask you something, about your second point on this list, which is that some sports and universities have had to reduce funding, and that in some cases they've discontinued sports. So you mentioned a couple of sports that have been hit. Which sports do you think are most relevant to UK students and European students who quite often go for sports scholarships in America?
Yeah, so
struggle now.
The sports that we tend to participate mostly in have been hit, but the good thing is there are so many universities that offer soccer. For example, you got over 1,700 universities that play soccer in the US. Now, not all of them offer scholarships, but still, University of Cincinnati having scholarships reduced, or other unis going from D2 to D3 or D1 to D3. They've all had some form of a hit, however big or small it may be. But I'd say the sports that we have, like soccer, golf, tennis, field hockey, that's had a bit of a hit, but Stanford, etc. But again, I'd say for us, track and field, it's not something you're going to notice too much in terms of sports being discontinued. Swimming is another one. There has been a handful of sports unis that have discontinued swimming, but again, the ones that are really going to notice it are going to be your fencers, for example, where they didn't have many unis to start with. So when a few unis choose to discontinue fencing, you're really going to feel that because you didn't have a lot already. Gymnastics has had a couple that have had to discontinue again, but that's not what I would class as a mainstream sport here in the UK. You've actually got Alaska Anchorage right now running fundraisers to try and keep the gymnastics team going, so that they can, again, continue it in years going forward. But my experience, whether it be men's football, men and women's football, golf, tennis, athletics being some of the main sports that we have, they haven't been hit anywhere near as hard as other sports. So that's a very long answer to a short question. But
so which ones have actually gone and might not make a reappearance?
Doesn't look like Cincinnati's soccer will return. There's a lot. I wouldn't be able to go through a list of the university just because there is quite a few. But again, Brown have cut. They've cut, I think, 7 sports, or maybe no, there's between 9 and 11 sports. I think one of them have continued though. You look at Stanford, for example. I had a male rower at Stanford. They had a really strong men's rowing program, and they've now discontinued that. So it's one that, in terms of discontinuing, there's not loads in our main sports, but again, they will all have some form of reduced funding.
Yeah. And so are there any sports where, just given the picture as a whole in America, you would tell students to be a bit careful this year because of the fewer opportunities?
Yeah, I guess to say to students to be careful will be completely dependent on what level they're at, both academically and from a sporting standpoint. Because if someone is an elite level athlete in a measurable sport, for example, let's say a swimming or a rowing, track and field, where you've got your erg times or whatever it may be, and they've already posted some good times, and coaches can already see that they're at a high level, so they're still going to likely want to recruit that athlete. If you're an athlete that is looking like you're on a good trajectory going up, but again, you're not quite there yet, then that's something you're just going to have to be wary of. Just be aware of, in a way, that well, how likely is it that competition starts again? Right now, I might have opportunities to this university, but I want to go to these unis, and in order to get to them, I need to carry on with that progression. And am I going to be sort of restricted in terms of being able to get that progression? So for me, if you're an elite, a very strong athlete in your sport, and pretty good in the classroom, you wouldn't need to be too wary in terms of the opportunities. The sports like football, your team sports, where you're a bit restricted right now. If you can't even go out and get video footage to show coaches what you can do, if you don't have access to any past games, that's where you need to be a little bit more careful, because for a coach to want to recruit you, you've got to be able to show them what you can bring. If you're a striker, they want to see, okay, what are your strengths? Are you going to be able to hold up the ball if they're looking for that sort of striker? Get whatever it is that they're looking for, you've got to be able to highlight that to a coach. Now, if you've got no video proof to show that, coaches aren't going to part ways with $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year in sports funding. There are other things you can do, but unfortunately with the travel bans, for example, so if you didn't have video, usually what we'd say is look at going to a camp in the US to show in person to coaches what you can do. At the moment, you can't fly into the US. And if you do have a US passport, then that does make life a bit easier. Most of you listening probably don't. So again, that is something where if the US does allow entry and we are allowed to travel again sooner rather than later, that is another option to consider if you're not able to get footage. Because again, you need to show coaches. No coach is going to offer scholarship funding in team sports without seeing you play, unless they have an incredible relationship with your coach who is going to vouch for you. And that's rare. In the UK, they might have that in the US with high school coaches that they've worked with in previous years and they've vouched for them. But more often than not, that's not going to be the case here.
Okay. All right, that's good advice. So generally, if you're a better athlete, you're higher up in level, you've still got good chances there.
Yeah, and then that's not to say the lower athletes don't have. It just comes down to what a student is expecting. If you're a student that is saying, look, I want to go to a Stanford or a Duke or a Cal Berkeley, then you're going to have to be really high end if you're looking for big funding. And again, you take a year out of anyone's progression, and it's going to be very hard to compete with people that have had an extra year of setting new marks. In Australia, for example, where they haven't had as many, but they're still competing, or in the US internally, they're still competing. So it's just having them tempered expectations.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and related to that, one of the things I put on my intro slide was about funding. And obviously you've talked a lot about how funding has been reduced. Do you expect that level of funding to go back up to the levels it was before once the whole pandemic is over?
I would definitely hope so. To be honest with you, it's something universities, especially in the US, sports is huge. It's part of their culture. They want to be bigger. They want to be better. Coaches, that's why they invest in scholarships to have people from the UK and around the world come in to study so they can be more successful. When it's financially viable again and they're making the TV money, that's where they've been hit bad. The basketball and American football, college sports being cancelled at the end of last year, lost them billions in revenue, the NCAA, and that in turn lost the individual universities money. The attendances at the universities aren't full attendances, so that's losing them more money. So when all of that gets back to normal, I would expect the scholarship numbers to start going back up at the unis that had reduced it. To say whether unis that had discontinued will go again, anyone that says yes is guessing, in my opinion. I don't think there's no crystal ball out there that says with certainty, but my experience is universities want to win. They want the bragging rights, shall we say, in terms of being national champs or getting to the Final Four in college basketball, whatever it may be. So they will invest the money to help them get there when it's available and when all of the other sports are bringing in the money. Because college football and college basketball pays for basically the other sports. So when they get hit, most of the other sports feel it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, there's a good few questions coming in. We'll definitely deal with each of those specifically individually at the end. But I'm going to go on to the next slide because I think that might help you, Rob, talk about some of those things that are coming in. So do you want to say a little bit about the general sort of sports that are offered in the US?
Yeah, so there's, as you can see, there's a number of sports you can get scholarships in, and there are others on that aren't on this list. But again, we've put just how many colleges compete. You see, I starred some of them because this isn't how many universities offer scholarships; it's how many universities play these sports. So when you look at US universities, you'll see varsity and you'll see club. Varsity are universities that can offer scholarships or supported spots. Club, it's just you get into the uni, you do it all on your own, and they will have a club sport that you can play, but you're not going to get funding for that sport. You look here, again, the big sports that we have in the UK pretty much are on the left, and then you got some, I wouldn't say lesser sports, just because some of them are huge sports still, but again, not as many people in the UK compete compared to the group on the left. As with anything, it comes down to the amount of universities that offer the sport, how many scholarships are available, to how good you need to be. You look at a lacrosse player from the UK, and you're going to need to be top end in the UK really to get some good scholarship opportunities. Where if you're a cross country runner, a female cross country runner in the UK, you can be mid-level county runner and you could still get very good, close to full scholarship. So it's a huge variation there. The mouse has just literally, I think, toppled over bowling, which yes, you are reading that correct, everyone. There are 10-pin bowling scholarships available for female athletes, not for men, unfortunately. You might see that actually, whilst I mention that, if you see with the NCAA, every college can offer female rowers 20 scholarships, male rowers 0 scholarships, or track and field 12.6 for men, 18 scholarships for female athletes. That's because of something called Title IX, and it means when all of the sports are added together, there has to be the same amount of opportunities for men and women. With American football only offering scholarships for men, there's no female equivalent, so other sports have to make up that shortfall. So if anyone sees that, that's one of the main reasons why.
Great, thanks, Rob. So let's move on to the next slide, where you've got your general slide about sports recruiting.
Yeah.
Do you want to just take us through very briefly what the sort of things that are involved in sports recruiting are?
Yeah. So anyone that's thinking about going to university in America, first of all, have that chat with your family. Think, right, is the US a route that you want to go down? If you can answer that yes, my advice is get started straight away. Don't wait, because all you're going to do by waiting is opening the opportunity for other students to get ahead of you in the game. We start at a disadvantage in the UK because we're not in America. Coaches won't just hear about us through a high school coach or hear about us through an online article that's in the US or whatever it may be. So we have to be proactive in getting out in front of the coaches. Now, the first point of call is the coach. It's irrelevant if you get admitted to a university if the coach doesn't want you as part of the team, because again, the coach has to agree. Even if you just want to train, the coach has to agree. And then if the coach does want you, it makes the whole admissions process considerably easier. Things like the SAT, ACT test scores, they can be a little bit more lenient on. GPA criteria can be, again, a little bit more lenient. Financially, obviously, can be a lot better and considerably cheaper. As I touched upon on the previous slide, there are limitations from each sport. Men's track and field, we've got an example here, and that's why you want to get out in front of them as soon as possible. Because the sooner you can get out to them, the more exposure you can build, then in all likelihood you're going to get to them before they've verbally given their money away to someone else. Scholarships, they can increase and they can decrease from year to year. To have a scholarship decrease, you have to do something pretty drastic, to be honest with you. You have to fail a drug test, to get arrested, have a terrible attitude to your training, to competition, and to just really just not be an athlete that the coach wants to have as part of their team. It's not something that they will just say, bang, your scholarship's gone. There will be lots of prior warnings as well that will be documented. And I'm happy to say that is extremely rare to happen. My experience is athletes that do get scholarships to the US have had years of sacrifice in terms of being able to train and just to better themselves at their sport. So that's something that is rarely an issue with them. The thing that is more likely to happen is if you're not on a full scholarship, your scholarships can go up year on year, purely based off of your performances. So if your performances warrant it, coaches can then give you more funding based off of the impact you're having, usually to start off with in conference meets. Again, in a normal circumstance, you can have the opportunity to take 5 official visits. And an official visit is where a college will pay to fly you out to the campus for a 48-hour period without any commitment that you're going to choose them. It's where you can meet the coaches, you can meet the guys or the girls in the team that you're potentially going to join, watch a training session, look around the surrounding area to see what it's like, sit in on a lecture, to give you a real feel for the university. And it's a good just to get an idea of what that place is like. With travel bans, etc., it's not something that's possible right now. I know a lot of universities are doing virtual tours at the moment, which aren't the same, but again, it's just trying to make the best of the current situation. So they are doing virtual tours. They're having lots of group talks on Zoom with their current guys or the girls in the team and potential recruits. So you can ask questions and they literally will be on the phone and they'll put the video on and they'll start walking around campus and you can have a feel for what it's like from that aspect. Hopefully, again, who knows, but hopefully by the end of this calendar year, we'll be able to travel to the US again and things like visits can start again, but we're a bit unsure on that right now. Then anyone that's going to be going to the US on a sports scholarship will need to register with the NCAA. The NCAA is the governing body of college sports. They're going to be looking at 2 main points for any student that studies plays sports in America. The first one is your academic eligibility, and the second one is your amateurism status. Big thing to understand with amateurism status, one of the main criteria is you're not allowed to receive any financial benefit due to your sporting ability. So anyone that might feel a bit concerned about this, feel free to email us or ask us any questions and we'll go through whether that is a big factor or not. If you do, don't flaunt it all over social media because that will make it easy for them to find and it will potentially cause problems with eligibility. But you'll need to send academic information like GCSE certificates and transcripts to the NCAA so you get your ID number and you can then compete in college sports. And this is something that Americans and international students have to do. If you're not on a scholarship, slightly different.
All right, that's really useful. And coming on to the topic of eligibility, let's talk about academic side of things. So we've had a few questions about this already.
Yeah.
I think the one that people always ask about is SAT and ACT.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, last year was a very rare year in which it wasn't required by the NCAA, but am I right in saying that those test scores are again required this year?
Not for 2021. Students starting in 2021 don't need it for NCAA eligibility, but they haven't made any announcements after that. I expect it will be needed, but no one knows. The NCAA have never hinted at removing the test scores. The only reason that they've said for 2020 and 2021 is the obvious disruption on schools being or homeschooling and test centers, as we were talking about prior to this starting, Jason, being closed literally 24 hours in some cases before the tests were due to start, is a lot to take with everything else going on for students. So they've said for this year and next year, or last year and this upcoming year, it isn't a requirement, but I expect for students from 2022 onwards will need it. Okay. But again, it's because you might see some universities don't require it. And a big thing, don't fall into that trap. If you're starting in 2022 or 2023, just because the uni doesn't require it, it doesn't mean that the NCAA won't. And if they do and the uni don't, you still have to do it because you can get into the uni, but you won't be playing sports. So my advice has been to students, plan to do it, you do it. And if you do really well, that's another thing we can add to your application. It can be a help towards getting more academic funding. And as with anything, we would rather have it and not need it further down the line, as opposed to needing it and not having it and trying to rush right at the end. And as I'm sure you can vouch better than most of us, Jason, the SATs and ACTs aren't exams you can prepare for in a week or two. It takes
No,
a
they're
lot of
definitely not. I always say this, they're not crammable exams, not like GCSEs, which you might have got away with doing that, but with SAT and ACT, that they really reward practice over a long period of time, which is why they're still used. And you can't just memorize the stuff, you've just got to get good at the test. So as Rob was saying, be very careful, because this year, it looks like most colleges that you'll be thinking about are test optional for academic entry.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do the test and shouldn't submit it. And in fact, for sports, you might have to submit the score. So if you are submitting it, you'll then want to have a good score. So as always, our advice on that is start early with the
Yes, I agree.
It will make your life easier, especially with tests getting cancelled. So regards to other academics, you mentioned that they'll look at GCSE, they'll obviously look at predicted A levels and things. How much do they look at that? What sort of grades would you expect people to get?
So the first part, how much do they look at it? A lot. Just as it is here in the UK, if you want to go to Oxbridge, you're going to need pretty good grades, right? If you want to go to Stanford, you want to go to Duke, your GCSEs and your A levels are going to have a much bigger impact than if you want to go to some, let's say, less academic universities. So in terms of how important are they, comes down to what experience you're looking for and unis you want to go to. But again, sort of not wanting to repeat myself, with anything irrelevant of the academic university you go to, the better you perform in your GCSEs, your BTECs, your IBs, your A levels, the more opportunities there are going to be for you, because the less favours a coach needs to ask admissions and the more academic funding you can get. Academic funding doesn't come out of the sports scholarship budget, which, as we've already mentioned, in a lot of sports and a lot of unis has been cut ever so slightly. So if a coach doesn't need to offer you as much of their sports scholarship, but can still get you on a full ride, as they would call it, because you can get a good chunk of academic funding, you're going to be a much more attractive option to a coach than someone who doesn't have the great grades, and he or she needs to use all sports funding on you. So that's what I'd say from an academic standpoint. In terms of what grades do you need, I wouldn't, again, the higher the better, but even if you struggled at GCSEs, it doesn't mean that you can't go to America. If you did struggle at GCSEs, it means that Stanford isn't going to be a uni that you would want to go to anyway. So their academic criteria is not really a problem for you. Universities in America, just like in the UK, there are the top tier, and there are unis that are comparable in all levels for UK universities. So again, as long as you're sort of, I always hate to say sort of like grades and things like that, but you're not going below D's, you potentially can get opportunities if you go lower than that at some unis. But again, the better you do, the more opportunities.
Great, thanks, Rob. Okay.
So one thing, sorry, Jason, just to mention, the US will go off of GPA. So GCSEs will have the biggest impact on your GPA. So GCSEs are really important. That's not to say A levels or IB or BTEC they're not important. They're still extremely important. But doing well in your GCSEs makes life a lot easier for students. For NCAA sports, a 2.3 GPA is the minimum for eligibility criteria in Division 1. If you're looking at NAIA universities, it's a 2.0 GPA. And if you're looking at junior colleges, it's a 1.0 GPA. So again, like I was mentioning, if you haven't had the grades for whatever reason, there are still opportunities to get out to the US. So sorry, go for it, Jason.
Great, thanks, Rob. No, I think this is a good opportunity now to talk a bit about, answer the questions that are coming in, and that will help enable us to talk about other points. So I'm going to dive straight in with some questions here about academics, since we're talking about them. The first one here is, how much do really good academics like IB and SAT, for example, help with gaining a full scholarship? Now, I know you've just talked about how they're important. This is a common question about balancing academics and sports. And what would you say to someone who's asking, well, should I put my efforts into the academic side of things, or should I put it into the sports side of things? And how much is it going to matter at different universities?
Yeah, it's as we both have answered for many years in different presentations, it depends on the university that you're looking at, for one, and depends is a word that is used quite often. Having really strong academics is going to help from at a number of universities, because that can get you a large amount of academic funding, but not every university has 30, 40% or 50% of academic funding available, especially the more competitive universities. So it can definitely help with admissions. How should you balance it out? It comes down to a few things, really. What are you looking to get out of the US university experience? Are you hoping to be an Olympian, or are you hoping to be a professional golfer? Or are you looking to use your sport to help you get into a strong academic university? I'd say to anyone, there's no right or wrong answer to whichever one you are. But again, that is going to make an impact on what you should spend most of your time on. Again, it's always trying to find the balance. And you've got students, anyone that's listening to this, you've got to find out what works for you in terms of striking that balance between how much should you practice, how much should you study. Some people are very fortunate where they don't have to spend hours studying and they can still do very well in the classroom. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them, but I guess for anyone, academics are key, but when you're looking at sports scholarships, the sport is going to make the biggest impact, is the blunt and brutal answer. If you're an Olympian level athlete, or if you're a world junior level golfer, coaches are going to do whatever they can to get you in their program. But in reality, how many world junior golfers are there? Not many. In terms of like winner's circle, how many future Olympians are there? They don't come around every week. So that's where it depends on the person, the university experience that they want, and their budget as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. And what I always say to people on this question is, just remember that whether you're going for a sports scholarship or whether you're going down the academic route, American applications are holistic, and they're going to consider everything. Now, the academics are important because they prove to the university you're going to be able to cope with life at university on the academic side of things. And if you're going for a sports scholarship, they need to have that reassurance, especially if it's a more academic university. So if you want to go for a sports scholarship at Duke, which is a really academic university, you need to prove that you are at least going to be able to cope with academic life there, especially because it's going to be on top of your sports. So they do matter. And that brings me on to the next question here, which is, I've booked my ACT exam for June. Is it going to be significant, or is it just an extra alongside my GCSE and A levels? Well, as Rob has been saying, it may be required, you don't know yet, and getting a good score could be significant. It could either make up for a shortfall in your GCSEs, or it could add to your profile and show that you're a good academic student. So,
and to give you a really good example, it's not for Duke, Jason, but for Stanford. I had a rower a couple of years ago. This is when it was required. And I don't know what year the student was that asked that question, but if they asked 2022 or 2023, who knows, it might be required. They would have offered her a full scholarship, but she got 1 mark off of the minimum criteria to get in, so they could admit her to the university, so she couldn't go. And they had a full scholarship there waiting for her. So it's extremely frustrating. So that should answer, they are important. Even for there's only so much give, the more academic universities can sort of have it for admissions.
Yeah. And I think the final question I've got here about academics, which I think I'll answer, is, are we concerned that the ACT and SAT might be cancelled during the summer? And this person's understanding is that they're only being cancelled outside the US. Well, yeah, there is a concern about that. I'm more concerned about the upcoming ones. I know that a lot of test centres have cancelled the March SAT, and there are very few test centres available for ACT in April. But I think after that, things are going to get better. The reason they're being cancelled is because of lockdown, particularly in the UK and Europe. And we should see things start to get better once schools start to open up again, whenever that is. Now, if things stay on track, it's going to be hopefully mid-March, maybe later for secondary schools and sixth forms. But hopefully by April, we should see things much better. So I would be very surprised if the summer tests were cancelled. June and July and August dates, I would seriously suspect that they're going to go ahead. So my advice always is book them anyway. If they get cancelled, yeah, it's really annoying, but all you can do is book them and hope they're going to go ahead. So do try and book ahead. You can book through to July for the ACT, and you can book the May SAT. And then after June, July, you'll be able to book tests for the next academic year. So do get on that as quickly as you can. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some other questions here. Let's talk a bit about the recruitment process again. One person's asked about track and field, which, as you mentioned, is a measurable sport. So that makes it a bit easier. This person said, do you just send the times to coaches? I mean, this is a good question. How do you decide which coaches to send them to yourself if you're going to do it yourself?
That's probably one of the hardest parts in terms of understanding what is going to be a good fit for you, as opposed to biting off more than you can chew, or maybe underselling yourself in a university. So that's where you can look at previous times at meets in their conference. That's usually the best way to start, is looking at a university's conference championships. What are the times that get in the top 8 in your event, and how close are you to that? Now, in all likelihood, you're not going to get that in year 1. Maybe you will, depending on your level, but are you potentially going to get that in year 2 or year 3? Because that's pretty much what coaches are looking at to start off with. You definitely want to send them your PBs. Coaches can see it on the Power of 10, anyone here in the UK, so that's easy and it's verifiable. Depending on the event that you do, again, if you're a triple jumper, or they're going to want to see your technique as well. They're going to want to see what are your recent finishes like. Again, not at the moment, but prior to lockdown, have you got any injury backgrounds that they need to be aware of? They're some of the main things that they're looking at, and also how have you performed at the big events in the UK? English schools being a big one, and again, depending on your event, how have you done in them events? And if you've done well, that's going to give the coach a bit more peace of mind that when it comes to the big meets, that you won't sort of crumble, shall we say, under the pressure, and you can do it in the pressure moments.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Okay, and talking about team sports rather than measurable sports, how do you show your potential if you're going to try and do it yourself? Now, I know this is obviously much, much harder, and as you said, you need to get video and stuff. There are a few questions about that here. One is, how do you show your potential? And another person has asked, I've lost it now, but it was a similar sort of question.
I saw one about, should you get in touch with coaches now or wait for team sports? Wasn't there one, I think?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So for me, I would say, if you want to get in touch with coaches, you want to just make them aware of you. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, they're not going to say, yes, that we're going to recruit you now if you've got nothing, but at least let them know that you're there, and let them know your top achievements. So a good starting point is your top 3 sporting achievements, your top 3 academic achievements. If you're lucky enough where you have more, then do 4. Don't go above 5, but bullet point it. Make it precise and clear to the point to the coaches. Coaches do not want to read an essay about your sporting life. They've got other things to do. They've got a lot of things to do at the moment with planning meets and training their team at the moment, whatever it may be. So we want to make it as short and simple for them, just to see the main points. Universities have questionnaires as well. Go and fill their questionnaires, get into their system so that you're there and they can see the teams that you play for if you're a soccer player. I saw one was soccer, so hence why I'm saying soccer. Even if it's just going to the park and with a friend, just doing some cone drills. If you're a striker, just get a wall on the wall, use some cones on a wall or whatever it is, get some chalk, draw a little goal, and just do what you can. Now, again, it's not going to be ideal, and it's not what a coach is going to recruit solely off of, but it shows that you're trying, and that does count for some of it as well, especially if you have the ability where you can, when you're showing them on video, it looks pretty good. And then when games start going again, you just keep updating the coaches, right? Games have started now, or they're starting at the weekend. Once I'm going to record the game, once we've got it, I'll send it through to you to show you what I can bring. So it's all about getting in front of them.
Great, and that kind of answers this question about if you were supposed to be taking part in international tournaments that were cancelled, what can you do now? And I guess it's the same thing, right?
Depends on the sport. It's really hard. So, like rowing, for example, is a sport that's a bit luckier than others because if you're fortunate enough to have an erg machine, that is what a lot of coaches will recruit off of. Obviously, water achievements is important, but if you can tell them your erg times, then they can still recruit off of that. And if you have one in your house, you could carry on through this whole lockdown. You could carry on erg training. So that was fine, but most sports don't have that flexibility. If you were meant to have international competitions, it's depending on the sport, it's hard to say exactly, but if it's one that you've qualified for, then it means you're probably at a good level. And again, you let the coaches know about you, because if you're at a good level and they like the potential that you might have, it's very likely that they will wait some time for you. Again, depending on the level, it all comes down to the sport and what that coach is looking for.
Sure. Well, there's a few questions here all along the same lines about actually getting in touch with the coaches. How do you do it? Do you just write them an email? And what sort of email should you write? And is there one place that you can contact all the coaches?
No. So if you're looking to do this process on your own, my first bit of advice would be, right, first of all, having a look. You can have a look online of like matches that have taken place in the past in Division 1 men's soccer, Division 2 women's soccer, whatever it may be. You can have a look. If you're a track and field athlete, you can look at the Division 1 times from not last year because that didn't happen, but years past, what the winning marks were, what the people who got into the finals were posting. Things like that can help you get an idea of where you should be aiming at in terms of the level. What a lot of people have the misconception of is that it has to be Division 1 or I don't want to go, and Division 2 is not very good. Division 2 offer lots of sports scholarships just like Division 1 do. And some Division 2 universities are extremely competitive, and in some sports they're better than the lower tier Division 1 uni. So I wouldn't rule out a uni purely based on it being Division 2. You can end up having a better experience from it. So have as open of a view as possible to start, see where they are. If you're, again, you can at soccer, look at where the guys or the girls played on their team prior. You can look at the roster. You can see any international students, if there's anyone from the UK, if you're a UK student, see where they played before, because it usually has a prior to arriving at Stanford or prior to arriving at Duke, wherever where they went to high school, what level they played at. Is all going to be important. And when you go onto the university's websites, you can get usually the coaches' details if you just click on roster, and you can then usually select coaches. Not every university will have the head coach that does the recruiting. Some unis will have recruiting coordinators. That will be one of the assistants. So make sure you're contacting the right people. If you don't have the confidence of doing it on your own, that's something we can help with. We do all of the coach communication and sort of get students into the level that sort of suits their ability and what they're looking for, both academically and from a sporting standpoint. But again, you don't have to use someone like us. You can try to do it on your own. What I say to most people is it comes down to how much time you can commit to the process. If you can commit the time to do the research, to find the right unis for what you're looking for, then by all means, there are all sorts of opportunities out there.
And relating to actually emailing them, I know a lot of websites have the contact forms for the coaches there, like an expression of interest. What should a student say in that expression of interest? So the particular ways they should write that message or things they should include?
Yeah, so the first thing, there's two different things you can find. You can first of all find the Recruiting Questionnaire on the athletics page website, athletics meaning all sports. So if you wanted like women's rowing or men's track and field, you go onto their page and there will usually be a recruiting questionnaire, and it will ask you to complete that. You might not be able to complete all of it because some of it won't be relevant to you if you're from the UK. You do as much as you can and you submit it, and it gets you into their system. A lot of coaches will want you to do that. If you're going to email the coaches directly, as I touched upon earlier, what you don't want to do is write them a huge life story about what you've been doing over the last 10 years to get to the level you're at right now. The first thing you're doing in that email is trying to generate that interest in you. you're not, that one email isn't going to be the be all and end all in terms of, right, once I've read that, I want to offer you a full scholarship. It's never going to happen. The coaches are going to want to talk to you. They want to get to know you. They're going to want to get to know your family, more of your academics, whatever it may be, prior to making that offer. So initially we want that bang, right? Bullet points. What's your academics highlights up to now? Bullet points, sporting side. What's your main sporting achievements up to now? They're the things you want to focus on, because again, that's all that a coach is looking for initially, of whether they want to recruit you. If you're not at the level from a sporting standpoint and you need full scholarship funding, for example, it's even if you are a 4.0 GPA, which is great, they're not going to have you in their team if they don't feel you're good enough and you're going to contribute.
Okay, that's really useful. A question here, which I'm not sure I fully understand, and maybe you can shed some light on it. Is, how do we get in touch to start the process before contacting the coaches? But I think contacting the coaches is the start of the process. Is that right?
Yeah. To start the process, really, if you're talking about us starting the process, that's different. So, like, anyone that wants to learn about opportunities and just for a free evaluation, you can always contact us and we can tell you what the opportunities we feel there would be for you. If you're thinking about doing it on your own, as Jason just mentioned, the coach is going to be the start. Or if you're in a team sport, trying to get some video or just trying to get the information at hand, you can have a look at some research. I'm always a bit conscious in terms of the sporting side, because I completely get when you're going down the academic route, you're going to spend a lot of time researching the universities that's going to be right for you. But really, you want an idea of what coaches are interested in you. You could spend hours and hours researching. These are the universities that tick the boxes. Quite often when families come up to me and tell me that, it's usually your Stanfords and your Dukes and Cal Berkeleys are on the same list all the time, which are very competitive. Finding out what coaches are interested should be one of the first points, or contacting the coaches, to gauge their interest should be one of the first stages. Things like registering with the NCAA, that will happen throughout the process. You don't need to register first in order for coaches to speak with you. You don't have to have finished your SAT or ACT exam in order for coaches to speak to you or to make an offer. Again, it's I keep repeating, getting in front of the coaches is key. They have to know that you exist, otherwise they can make an offer to someone else. Okay,
great. We're running out of time, so I'm going to fire some questions at you to see if we can get through these other ones. So you're only allowed to give very short answers now.
Yeah, I'll try.
My first question here is, even though Division 3 doesn't give sports scholarships, can the Division 3 coaches still recruit?
Yes. Of course, definitely. They still have sports programs, and although it's not funded like the Division 1 and Division 2 unis, they still can support applications at some of the Division 3 unis. Not all of them, but some of them can, and still they compete to a very high level. So it's definitely worthwhile doing. I have a lacrosse player at Swarthmore right now who had a supported application, and which is a very good D3 university.
Great college as well. Really easy one for you. Do Ivy League colleges give sports scholarships?
No, they don't. So I'll answer two things to that. First of all, a lot of people have the common misconception that Ivy League is like your Russell Group top tier academic university in America, tiering system. It's a sports conference, okay? It's a group of 8 universities that compete against each other in sporting fixtures. Now, they are very strong universities academically. I'm not taking that away, but there are other very strong universities outside of the Ivies. But short answer is no, they don't offer sports scholarships.
Great. This person said, is it true that Stanford do not give academic scholarships? That may well be true. I think this would require a longer answer from me about financial aid.
Yes.
Stanford do give financial aid. So it is possible to apply to Stanford and be means tested if you're accepted in order to get aid. It is harder for international students, and it's easier if you're a better student. But they certainly give sports scholarships, don't they, Rob?
Yep, I've got a couple of students at Stanford right now who have got full scholarships, everything paid for.
Great. Okay, there's a few questions here about the alternative to a sports scholarship. So one person said, if you don't want a sports scholarship, is it possible to use sports to get into college? Now, I think that would be a question that I answer quite a lot, which is yes, definitely. Having extra things in your profile that demonstrate your passion and commitment to something is good. So having a sport that you play to a high level that might not be at the level for a sports scholarship, or might be at that level, but you don't want to go on a sports scholarship, you don't want to be bound to the team, then yes, that still looks really good. But Rob, do you want to say a bit about how perhaps, you know, with your student at Swarthmore, how using sports can get you into university without a scholarship?
Yeah, so you can get a supported application still, which is exactly what an Ivy League university would do, actually, which we just said, no, they don't do it, like they don't have sports. Now, Ivy League universities do compete at very high levels in sports. And like you said, the financial aid they do offer, or needs-based anyway. But if you get a supported application, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a sports scholarship, but the coach can put in basically a good word for you with admissions, which makes the admissions process ever so slightly easier. Like with Swarthmore, you still talk to the coach first. The coach will take your academic information. They will go for a pre-read with the admissions team, and they will say, based off of this information you've given us, if you want to support this applicant, we will accept them. Okay, or it's very likely we will accept them. It's not an official guarantee, but you'll get like a likely letter with the Ivies, for example. You can also get a spot where you just apply completely on academics and you don't talk to a coach, and you just decide, right, when I get there, I'm going to go to the tryouts and I'm going to try and get into the team. Again, that's risky, but that would be called a walk-on. So it's a terminology that people might see when they're searching online. You can be a walk-on, but again, don't risk it. Even if you don't want a sports scholarship, speak to the coach, because it can just make things like the SAT or ACT criteria a little bit lower. The chances of you being accepted higher, especially with the numbers, as you know, Jason, the numbers going up in terms of applications at a lot of these selective unis. You want to use any advantage you can. And again, you might want to use your sports, your academics to get in and just see if your sports can help you, whether it's extracurriculars, whether it's the coach. It's all good.
Completely agree. Sports are good. Okay, nice quick answers now, Rob, because the questions are coming in quicker than we can answer them.
Cool.
This person's asked a really good question, which is, if you can afford fees, but for other reasons you don't want to pay them, who wants to pay them? Can you still get scholarships? So basically they're saying, are scholarships means tested?
No. It depends on the university. Okay, you go into an Ivy League, again, it's not a sports scholarship, but a sports scholarship is not means tested. A sports scholarship is purely based off of your ability and whether the coach thinks you're going to come in and make us better. They won't even look at your financial circumstances. You could be a billionaire. If you're a GB athlete in swimming, you're going to get a full scholarship in all likelihood, or large funding.
But if you went to a place like an Ivy League college and you could afford the fees, you would be expected to pay them, even if you've gone down the sporting route.
Yes.
Okay, Rob, how many athletes has Sporting Elite USA sent to Division 1 schools? Must be quite a lot.
Quite a lot. It's been many years of placing students. I don't have the number on my head, but hundreds of athletes. We've been doing this for God knows how many years. Like if you look at me and Ben, who have started this from the beginning, we've helped students from 26 different countries get scholarships in the US. So to be honest, it's actually probably over 1,000 that we've placed. I'll have to have a look over our numbers to give exact figures, but it's a lot. Again, we've got students at your big time universities that everyone's heard of, but we've also got students at smaller Division 1 or mid-tier Division 1 or D2 unis, because not everyone is a Stanford, a Duke, or a University of Florida caliber athlete. So it's not the right approach for every student.
Great. Okay, a few questions here about becoming an athlete after you join the university. So let's say you were admitted to a university, congratulations. Could you become a student athlete while you're at college if you weren't recruited?
Yeah, definitely. So that's where what I mentioned earlier, the walk-on. So if you're at a university, most of the universities and most of the teams will have walk-on tryouts at the beginning of each year. If you go to them tryouts and you perform well and the coach likes what they see, you can join, and then you'll get most of the perks of what an athlete would get in terms of your clothing, travel with the team, etc., all paid for. And if you then continue to go up and up in the team and become a really important part of that team, then who's to say in years 2, years 3, years 4, you won't be on full or partial funding. If you earn it, the coach will give it to you.
Great. And there's a question here saying, can I submit footage after being admitted into the university? Well, if you're already admitted, you wouldn't need to submit footage. But I suppose if you subsequently wanted to get a sports scholarship, as Rob has said, then doing the tryouts at university is actually what would matter, not submitting footage from before university.
Yeah, definitely. You can do it. It's not going to do any harm. If you've been admitted to the uni and you just didn't have the chance to show footage because of lockdown or whatever it may be, then definitely submit footage. It's not going to hurt you whatsoever. And it might just, you could get lucky and the coach says, don't worry about tryouts when you come in. We'd love to have you as part of the team. It might be that the coach has some late funding. I actually had this with a soccer player from Ardingly College a few years back, who had funding open up in end of April, and he was starting in September, and he ended up with about a 30-40% sports scholarship added. He was already going, but the coach had that money open up. Doesn't happen that often. Don't plan on that, but you never know.
Okay. Are international students looked upon favourably, or is it just really just the quality of student they're looking for?
Coach couldn't care less where you're from. At most universities, the vast majority of universities, all they care about is, are you going to make us better?
Okay. And what is the latest that a coach could recruit?
Very late, but again, it's not something you want to plan on because you never know what's around the corner. I remember a few years back, Michigan asked me if I had a student that could start in September, and this was in May, end of May, beginning of June. But again, that's not normal. They usually recruit well in advance. So yes, you can have opportunities late, but ideally you want to start earlier. The earlier you start, the more opportunities. The later you leave it, the fewer opportunities is the quick answer.
Great. The question here, probably about academics, I'll answer it, is there leeway for people like students with learning difficulties, such as dyslexia? Yes, there are. Those are academic leeways. So you can get extra time for the SAT or ACT. Presumably you can get extra time for your GCSEs and A-levels, and that's where the leeway is. The university won't see that. So it's worth trying to get that extra time through your school, if possible. Okay, a question about official visits.
Yes.
How does it work? Do you have to contact the coach and then they offer you an official visit, or can you just apply for one?
No, so an official visit is where the uni will pay for it. So that's where the coach has to offer it. You can go on an unofficial visit if you want to fly out to the US.
Oh, it looks like we might have lost Rob there. Hopefully he's going to rejoin in a moment. Hopefully the rest
of
the
coach agrees to it. Again, you can go there and yourself. Sorry?
Sorry, Rob, I think we lost you for a moment. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now or not?
Yeah, we seem to be able to hear you now. A bit of a delay, but if you carry on. So
I don't know how much you heard, but basically an official visit is where a coach will pay to fly you out, and that has to be, it's up to the coach. If you're prepared to pay to go and visit the university yourself, that's an unofficial visit. You can go there as long as the coach agrees whenever you want, so the coach can show you around. But they don't have to agree to an unofficial visit. It's only if you want to meet the coach and things like that that they need to agree to it.
Okay, great. Just going to fire through these last few questions. Can you apply for more than one sports for sports scholarships?
Theoretically, yes, you can. It's very rare. And it comes down to what sports they are as well. Because if you're in a sport that's a high contact sport, like rugby, it's very unlikely that the track and field coach is going to want you to play rugby because of the chance of injuries. But I have had a javelin thrower in the past that also played volleyball. So there are opportunities. It comes down to, do the seasons conflict, the training conflict, and whether the coaches agree to it. You'd need to get that permission first. But more often than not, it's just one sport, because you won't have the time more often to do multiple sports.
Okay, that's great. How competitive is it for women's rowing in particular? Do you need to be at GB level?
No, you don't need to be at GB level. So women rowers, if you're open weight, then depending on what year you are in school, but by the time you're finishing year 12, I would want you to be 740 on the 2K free rate or faster. Again, all comes down to how much funding you're prepared to contribute, big or little. You can go a bit slower. If you want to go to Cal Berkeley, you're going to need to be a bit faster as well. Well, a lot faster.
Here's an interesting question. If a coach doesn't think that you're team material, would that affect your chances of applying through normal academic recruitment? Could you then just apply normally to the university?
That doesn't impact it. Because if you're applying academically, the coach isn't going to be honest with you, waste their time in impacting that whatsoever. It doesn't bother for a coach. If you get academically admitted to the university, they're thinking, great, good for you. They're not going to try to restrict you. If they don't think you're good enough to be part of the team, then they're just not going to support your application, but they're not going to stop you from going to the university.
Okay. Would there be a problem with going to the US and taking a prep year or competing in AAU or camps, or is it better to send in footage now? And this is actually particularly for basketball.
Yeah, so basketball is a bit different. I do like the idea of going to a prep school in America. I won't lie, purely because for basketball, the standard does tend to be considerably higher than what we have here in the UK. Getting out to the US and just having that coaching for a year or 2 years, depending on how you do it, and having that higher level of competition, coaches can easily come and watch you play. I think that's a great idea. It comes down to your level, your finances, because all of that will impact it. But there are more and more prep schools looking at international students. In the last 2 weeks, I've had free prep schools contact me saying that they're looking for internationals. So
okay, great. And we've got a question here about can you apply through ED or EA, so early decision, early action, if you're being recruited? And it doesn't work like that, does it, Rob? Or does it?
No, you can apply for early decision. Again, if you're at an Ivy League university and the coach wants you and they're going to use one of their supported spots for you, it's very likely they're going to say, we want you to do early decision because we want to know if we're going to give you our spot that we are your first choice. Okay. So it comes down to the timeline. So yeah, they would. It doesn't mean if you don't do early decision that you can't go, but if you do it early enough, that is what a coach would very likely want you to do.
But for sports scholarships in particular, they would be.
You don't have to. No, you can. I've had people apply past deadlines really, which isn't ideal. So don't take that as me advising you to do that. But yeah, if the coach supports you, you do the normal timelines.
Is water polo a recruited sport? I think it is.
It is. It is for both male and female athletes. It's not as widely competed in terms of universities that offer it as the main sports that we would have in the UK, like golf, football, tennis, etc. But yes, there are scholarship opportunities. You need to be quite a high level. So.
Great.
And videos too.
Just couple of questions that I think we can get through quite quickly. One person just wanted clarification about scholarships at Stanford. Is it possible to get scholarships at Stanford even if you can afford it? So I'm going to just explain about scholarships in general. Scholarships, so they're merit-based, whether it's sports or whether it's academics, and they are not means tested. So if you are good enough, you get the scholarship. Financial aid is means tested. So if you're applying to a scholarship, yes, you could get it even if you could afford the fees. But if you're applying for financial aid, so that is you're applying to a university that might offer aid to international students, then if you could afford the fees, then no, you wouldn't get the aid. That's the truth of it there. So for scholarships, not means tested, so yes, you could get it. And then we've got a few questions just about particular sports. Someone was asking about rough timing Stanford would expect for sprinting males.
Again, it comes down to a number of factors, but if you're looking for full scholarship funding, again, these are rough times because it does vary year on year, but you would want, for the 200, you want to be about 20.8 there or thereabouts, and for the 100, you want to be around 10.3. there or thereabouts for that sort of university. Again, you might have some people that are a little bit slower, and you might have some people that have been a little bit faster and not got the full ride, but that's a rough guide. Again, we're talking the cream of the crop sort of universities there.
Well, I remember when 10.3 was a world record.
I know, it's ridiculous. This is and that's the same again, like that. The universities like Cal Berkeley and Stanford, they're so selective. They have people from all over the world that want to go to the universities. And again, that is the mark to be classed as a key target. So you can be slower and potentially still get scholarships, but literally they will have marks for a recruited walk-on, marks for a scholarship consideration, and then marks for a key target. They're the key target times I've just given you.
And what about swimming? In particular, rough times for 100, 200 fly.
So I wouldn't know that off the top of my head, but the general, is that for a male or female athlete? Sorry.
Female.
Female. So the general rule of thumb for female swimming, if you go off of FINA points, they want to see you having as close to or as far above 700 points in at least two different events. So they want to see that if they're going to recruit a freestyler, that you can also contribute in the backstroke, or you can also contribute in the IM, or whatever it may be. If you're looking at the top tier Division 1 colleges, you want to be closer to 800 FINA points. But again, I've got girls that are getting 650 points. Any swimmer will know what FINA points is as well. So any of you that are around sort of 600 or above at the end of year 11 GCSE year, you're on the right path. Great.
Okay, final question. I'm going to answer it. It's the big one. It'll allow us to end the presentation as well. The question here is, how do you know what university is right for you? That is a big question. And it's a question that we at UES deal with a lot for the academic side of things, because finding the right fit university, whether it's sport or academics, is really important. You're talking about a place where you're going to be trying to perform academically or in sports and get on well for the next 4 years of your life. So finding that right fit place is something that is difficult. Now, Rob's given some tips today about how to go about that, to consider what level of sports you want to be at, what level of academics you want to be at, where you want to be. Those things are important. Both Rob and UES, we give people advice on that. We can help with that. So that brings me on to the details of Rob here. So if you want to get in touch with Sporting Elite, email inquiries@sportingeliteusa.com. That's his phone number, and you can contact them on social media as well. Rob, do you just want to spend 20 seconds explaining what you do at Sporting Elite USA?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we'll go through the recruiting process with you, the opportunities that you potentially have based off of what you want, based off of your sporting level, academic levels. We'll say whether that's realistic, what you're looking for. Then we will do all of the coach contact, manage the whole recruiting process. So if there's any questions you have from start to finish, you have us you can come and speak to, and we'll guide you through each aspect, from coach contact, scholarship guidance, university guidance, visas, NCAA, etc. And just the last quick thing, like you mentioned, how are you supposed to know which uni you want to go to? The big thing you need to know, you're not expected to know where you want to go at the beginning. The recruiting process is designed so you can talk to multiple coaches, talk to the guys or the girls in the team that you're potentially going to be a part of, academic courses, locations, climates. So you learn all of that through the recruiting, so that by the time you get to the end, you can answer that question. You're not going to be able to answer it right now. So it's a journey to get to that stage.
Well said. And just to finish up, UES, the company that I work for, we deal with everything apart from sports. So if you want advice on academic applications, or you want help with the SAT or ACT, not the subject test, they've pretty much finished now. But we run courses, we have private tuition, we have a college counselling service. So do get in touch with us. If you're deciding between the SAT and ACT, you can take our diagnostic test there. It's ueseducation.com/diagnostic. We do have now weekly courses coming up for SAT and ACT. A weekly SAT course starting at the end of next week, which will be held every Sunday leading through to the May SAT date. So that might be something worth considering if you haven't yet started preparing for the tests. as we said all the way through, better to start thinking about these things earlier rather than later. Got our contact details there, info@ueseducation.com, if you want to get hold of us about any of those things. And we can always put you in touch with Rob if you've got questions about sports as well. So all that remains for me to say is, Rob, thank you very much. I know we covered an awful lot today. We got through it in just 15 minutes more than we thought we would.
It's pretty good considering what it's been in the past. So.
Yeah, but thank you so much. And I hope that lots of people email you afterwards with lots of questions. So thank you for joining today.
Thank you for organising it. I hope everyone found it helpful.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.